Hello, SBI TV subscribers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. By tuning in each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for making their numbers. On today's show, I am joined by Brandon Tolany. Brandon is both the Chief Sales Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer at Freescale Semiconductor. You might not know it, but you use Freescale's products every day, for they power your cars, your smartphones, your medical devices. They're in your life all the time. As one of the leaders in the semiconductor industry, the company does just under $5 billion in annual sales and employs a little over 17,000 people across the globe. Brandon is responsible for the company's global sales and marketing activities, has 20 years of business experience, and received his education from the University of Texas. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you having me.
All right, have a seat. So what do you think of this spot?
Not too bad.
Pretty nice, huh?
Yeah, not too bad.
Okay, so Brandon, today I'm going to ask you to help your peers make their 2016 number by demonstrating how to develop and execute a revenue growth strategy.
Okay.
And to do this, we're going to use SBI's Revenue Growth Strategy Workbook titled How to Make Your Number in 2016. And for those that are watching, if you want a copy of this workbook, go to salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-report. And if you want to have somebody from SBI teach you how to use it, sign up for our workshop at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 workshop. All right, here we go. So our firm's strategy, or our point of view, I should say, is that there are 6 steps to a revenue growth strategy. Now, today's show is only about 30 minutes. So we're only going to talk about one of those steps. For those that are watching, if you want the other 5 steps, tune in to future episodes of the show and you'll hear your peers demonstrate the other 5. But today we're going to talk about market research, which is really the first step. Because if you're going to design a revenue growth strategy, it has to start with what are your markets, who are you competing with, what do your buyers want, etc. So market research is simply defined as gathering market intelligence and using it to make better decisions to allocate 3 things: people, money, and time.
Okay.
Okay? So there are 3 activities to engage in when performing market research in pursuit of revenue growth. And the first activity is market segmentation. Okay? So let me ask you some questions about market segmentation. Sure. All right? So the first question is how do you divide your broad market into subsets of buyers that have common needs? How do you guys do that?
Yeah, we have a very diverse set of business groups within Freescale. So we have 5 different business groups. It really depends on the business group, but what we've really focused on is vertical market segments. So where we have a broad market like industrial, within that, we'll focus on a human-machine interface segment. And as we get narrow on the segment within the broader, larger segment, that's how we define what those market segments are and how we go attack them.
Okay, so vertical industry is the primary focus.
That's right.
Right. And you go after vertical industries based on what the opportunity is, based on the product set? How do you choose?
It evolves over time. Obviously, you have a set of products right now, and where you're good with those products, where you're winning, where you're gaining share, where you're growing, you focus. Market adjacencies emerge, and then we'll define those market adjacencies by size. So revenue and the ability for us to win within those markets is how we will define them.
And broadly speaking, how many markets are you in?
Dozens.
Dozens.
Yeah, dozens. But if we were to look at the largest ones, there's about 5 or 6 that are our focus markets.
Okay. Yep. And if I was to ask you how big your market is, and if we were to lump those big 5 or 6 together, roughly how big is it?
Well, let's look at the semiconductor market in its entirety. That's $332 billion today. Wow. CAGR is about 3%. Of that, we can't address all of it, but we can go after a very large percentage of that. So more than half is basically within our wheelhouse, if you will, for our products.
Okay. So given that, you go to market by vertical industry, or you're focused on vertical industries, huge market, pretty decent compounded annual growth rate, relatively speaking. So how do you go to market?
Yeah. So the compound growth rate is really, let's say it's homogenized across the overall market. But there are certain sub-markets within that are growing healthy double digits. Sub-regions within that are growing healthy double digits. So what we try and do is when something emerges over a multi-year period, like China for semiconductors over the last 5 to 7 years, we try and on the fly shift our resourcing towards those growth markets. So we have to have a lens that gives us maybe a 2 or 3 year horizon for revenue, and then we try and take a reasonably pliant sales force and then apply it to those growth markets. So we try and react.
Okay, very good. And ballpark, how many competitors do you have?
Dozens, but the main competitors, if we were to, who we will see on a daily basis, if you ask a standard salesperson or organization, okay, who are you competing with? It's under 10. There's under 10 companies that we will see head to head almost every day.
Okay.
Yep.
And in your industry, is there kind of a standard way that each competitor goes to market, or do you guys do things differently than they do?
Yeah, there's not a standard, but there are some common elements that everybody's got. Everybody's got their direct sales force on their key accounts.
Yep.
And then most will use either a sales rep model, which is a third-party company, or a distributor to supplement their sales force.
Got it.
So for Freescale, we've got just over 1,000 people in sales and marketing going to attack customers, but total, we've got tens of thousands of customers. Yeah. So we can't address all of those. We'll leverage a sales channel. Most of our competitors will leverage a similar model. Yeah. Some of our competitors will use no distribution channel, they'll ignore it. They'll use no third-party reps, they'll ignore it, and they won't get out of bed for less than 10 million units per device because they've earned that place in the market.
Yeah. Yep. Back to your go-to-market model and your competitors. In your industry, it's very much driven by the product life cycle, as I understand it. So does the go-to-market model in your markets change based on product life cycle or no?
Product life cycle is not as relevant for our go-to-market model. It's more the, let's call it the customer personality. So there are certain customers in the markets that we attack, which are just mega accounts. Super large, the design cycle is very long. Product life cycle is irrelevant. It's more about their design cycle. So if you hit them when they're in design, then you're going to be sticky and you're going to last 3 or 4 years rather than trying to do it once every 6 months, something like that. Got it. So it's about timing.
All right, very good. All right, so there you have it. We just heard about market segmentation, which is step 1 of the revenue growth strategy, which is market research. We talked about how big Brandon's markets are, how many there are, how he goes to market, why he chose vertical industry, who he competes with, relative market share per. So that should illuminate for you, our audience, to be thinking about, if I'm going to go do market segmentation, what are the types of things that I need to go do so that my revenue growth strategy is organized correctly? We're going to take a quick commercial break, but stick around because when we come back, Brandon is going to teach you how to determine the revenue potential inside of each of your accounts. So stick around.
This is not a table. It is a stage where your performance is measured in numbers. If you reach them, you get an encore. If you don't, it could be curtains. That's why you need the well-rehearsed, proven sales and marketing strategies of SBI.
Welcome back. You're watching SBI TV from On Location today. I am Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, and that is Brandon Tolini, Head of Sales and Marketing at Freescale Semiconductor. Today, we are trying to help you make your 2016 number by demonstrating how to develop and execute a revenue growth strategy. And we're using SBI's 6-step revenue growth methodology and the companion workbook to guide our conversation. Today, we're focused on step 1, which is market research. There are 3 key activities in this step. And before the break, Brandon and I reviewed with you the first activity, which was called market segmentation. We're now going to turn our attention to the second activity, which is account segmentation, okay? So we went from a broad thing like markets, right? To now we're at the account level. In the third segment, we're going to get to the individual level. But right now we're at the account level, right? So share with the audience what your ideal customer profile is.
Okay. For us, it's different, I think. Ideal customer profile for Freescale is already a customer. The barrier to securing new customers with our technology is very high. So the ideal customer for us is one that we're already incumbent in, but don't have a large share.
Got it.
Because then we can grow our share within. For us to win the first design, it's infinitely harder for us to win the second design at that same account. So the ideal profile for us is somebody that already uses our silicon, already uses our tools, is familiar with our software environment, but at the same time, we have a smaller share. And then we can go grow that share.
So you're in the account.
Yep.
And now it's about increasing share in the account.
That's exactly right. That's the ideal profile.
Got it. Now, some people in this step, which today we're calling account segmentation, have a scoring process.
Yep.
So they have this kind of ideal account, which you just described as a current customer. And then based on some dimensions, which for you it might be potential spend, they score the accounts against that.
Yep.
Do you guys do something like
We
that?
do. I wish it was a more perfect science, but yeah, we have a scoring system which is more, if we have a lower share, the total available share to us, that percentage gap, if it's large, and then for us, if our portfolio matches as well. So if you don't have the ideal portfolio and it's a huge TAM, you're not going to want to invest and you're not going to have it scored as highly. But if there's somebody that we have a small hold in that has a big number that's available to us and it matches our technology very well, that's going to score the highest. We then will take our resources and allocate them towards that target.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to rewind just a little bit because my next question, which is part of the process here, is how to figure out the revenue potential in each account.
Yes.
So you just explained that you start with an existing customer for the reasons you stated. You want to grow share. You define that share, but then you determine potential based on the product mix?
Yeah.
No?
Product mix is part of it. Potential is a served addressable market, if you think of it that way, where we already have silicon that will make sense for that particular customer. That's how we'll then define the value of the customer. We tend to not define the value of the customer by the customer itself, but by the design socket we're trying to win.
So for design socket, what does that mean?
That means, so we'll build a silicon, right? So a piece of semiconductor circuit that will be the main processor in a medical device. So a blood glucose monitor, for instance. The life cycle of that blood glucose monitor is what we'll value the design at. So if it's 7 years long and they're going to ship 1 million units a year, 7 million total units, multiply that by the value that we're selling to them, and that's the lifetime revenue of the account at that time.
So you actually have a lifetime revenue at the account level?
Yes.
Okay.
We compensate based on that.
You do?
Yes. That's part of our compensation system for sales.
Fantastic. Many organizations struggle with trying to determine the lifetime value of an account. You just explained to us how. That's really cool.
It doesn't mean it's accurate. It's just what we do. That's right.
Right. You're not just blindly throwing resources at it, right?
Yep.
All right. The second part of that equation is, so now you know the potential, lifetime value potential. Then you got to figure out how much is it going to cost our organization to go capture that. So how do you figure that out?
Ours is simple. We do a FTE analysis, so the full-time equivalent, the value of that resource that you're assigning to it, based on the total value that's available to you. It's simple math. So if you have 3 different account resources on a particular account that's value is $10 million over a 3-year window, and then you have another account that has a 3-year window of 100 million, we do an allocation of resources based on that value. So we'll drive the greater number of resources towards the larger growth for us.
Okay, so FTE, full-time equivalent. So that could be a channel manager, an account executive.
It could.
In your case, it's probably field application engineers.
Engineering,
Do you load in things like your direct reports and sales management up the chain?
So if we aggregate our regional performance, yes, but on an account-by-account basis, no. But we will do that. What we do is it's design win per head and revenue per head on a total region. So if there's 600 people in a particular region, total design is X, total revenue is Y. We'll have it by head on average. But typically at the account basis, we only do that for our, let's call it 60 or 70 largest accounts. And then we have the great unwashed 10,000 mass market accounts that don't have that level of granularity.
And those you serve through your alternative channels.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So on those big ones, which I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're a business that probably gets a lot of revenue from a small number of accounts?
You'd be surprised.
Really?
Yeah, we do. There are certainly our top, let's call it 100 accounts, but they don't make up 80% of our revenue. No, they don't. There's we only have one 10% customer as Freescale, and we report that publicly. That's Continental. We don't have any other 10% customers in our entire company.
Okay,
so we have a very broad market that we have
Okay.
to attack.
So, but you decided, back to this lifetime value and cost to acquire,
Right.
to only focus on those big accounts. You decided not to do that on the smaller accounts, especially on the cost side.
Well, we have another segmentation that we will call high touch, high growth. So HTHG, if there is a high growth potential where we have low share, we'll assign resources direct on those accounts where we have the big TAM to gain share. Where it's an account where we're fairly well saturated, or if it's a smaller account in the mass market, we won't do that level of analysis. We'll really rely heavily on the channel.
Okay, got it. Very good. So what was that called? High touch, high growth?
High touch, high growth.
And you guys have an acronym for that?
Well, 4 letters, HTHG. Yeah.
You say that like that.
That's right.
HTHG.
Yeah. Somebody that I work with is watching this is going to laugh at me for that. But yes.
That's
HTHG.
something you say all the time?
Try not to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The last part about account segmentation is this concept of propensity to buy.
Okay.
Right, it's one thing to say, hey, this account's worth $1 billion, and it's another thing for them to be likely to engage with you and have a need that you can solve. That's what we mean when we say propensity to buy. Does that apply to your space?
Certainly. Again, it's about design cycles. So if there is a big networking account that builds a router, that router doesn't get built necessarily every 3 months. So it's the swing of a 3-year cycle. And it takes from that first customer meeting where you're telling them about your solution to where it actually is in production can take 2 to 3 years. And then the production will last 3 to 5 years. So there's a window there that if you miss that design cycle, you're not going to be in that
For years.
For that socket. So that's the way we will prioritize resources and how we target the buying time is more about time.
How about revenue in your space?
Yep.
So you have the design win,
Yes.
then production. When do you actually collect the revenue?
Well, a diverse business. We've got, that's the shortest cycle for us would be likely in our microcontroller business. And from that first meeting until revenue, it can be about 6 months at its shortest. For a more mature market like automotive, it can be 5 years.
5 years.
Before you collect revenue. So you better bet right on which account that you're going at. Yep.
Plus, you must have a patient executive team.
Nope. No, I wouldn't say that. No. We've been in business a long time, so we know these cycles.
You know the cycles, yeah. All right. Okay, it's time for another short commercial break, but don't go anywhere. On the other side of this break, Brandon is going to teach you how to profile the individual decision makers in each of your accounts. So far, we've talked about the markets, then we went to the accounts, and now we're going to go to the individual people that you need to sell to in order to make your numbers. So stick around and come back after the break.
Your finish line is your number, and the only way to reach it is to make certain everyone is pulling their weight and headed in the same direction. That's why SBI uses proven techniques to bring everyone on your team on board with successful, standardized sales programs, enabling victory at the turn of every quarter.
Welcome back. This is SBI TV from our beautiful set today. I am Greg Alexander, and that is Brandon Tolani, who heads sales and marketing for Freescale. On this episode, we're helping you make your number by demonstrating how to develop and execute a revenue growth strategy. And we're using our 6-step revenue growth methodology and the associated workbook to keep us focused today. We have time today for one of the 6 steps, so we are speaking about the first step, which is called market research. In the first 2 segments, we demonstrated the first 2 activities in the market research step. First was segmenting markets, and second was segmenting accounts. In this segment, we're going to bring it down all the way to the individual. And we're going to cover the third activity, which is segmenting the individual decision makers inside of those accounts. Even though we're in the B2B world, people still buy from people, and understanding the wants, needs, and desires of the individual customer is essential. So buyer segmentation is just that. It's about understanding how your decision makers make purchase decisions. All right, I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question that I'm sure you can give me a 20-hour answer, but try to net it out for me. Who are your buyers?
Okay, so our business, for the buyer in our business, we don't have a lot of transactional business. We are almost 95% custom for every design that we're in. So it won't be Friday and you're trying to make your number for next week and you call up the buyer and say, hey, can you give me a little more share this week? It doesn't work that way. We're custom, so we are the only guy that's in the socket. So our buyers are typically wanting assurance of supply. If there's a quality issue, they want responsiveness, but they're not going to be moving share on a weekly basis because it's an incumbent position that will last a long period of time.
Okay. And is it a single person you have to convince? Is it a committee?
Yeah, so that would be the design decision, and on the design decision, it's typically not going to be in the procurement space. There's an influence, there is a relationship you have to manage there, but it is not typically solely made by the procurement organization. We're really heavily focused on engineering. So engineering and operations will be where we focus our resources, and that's where the decisions get made.
Okay, so since the engineers make the decisions, what do they care about?
So for us, it's pretty consistent, though it's evolving, but consistently it's power performance. So lowest power and highest performance in that power envelope is really critical for us. It's changing where they want to add more software or resourcing. So everybody's short resources, the more we can do for them, the better they're going to be positioned. So it starts with a piece of silicon that has the lowest power and highest performance in that envelope. And from there, what else can you give me?
Okay, so lowest power, highest performance.
That's
so
typical.
Yeah, and you were able to give that to me just like that. I ask that question to your peers sometimes, and they're like, well, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Good.
So how do you know they care about power and performance above all else?
You know, okay, so there's different segments of our business where there's going to be different criteria that come into the decision. Yep. But what we do is we build low power systems. And so our silicon is used typically in a battery operated system, but not always. And it's going to be lowest power envelope. It's pretty obvious. But where it gets more difficult is, okay, outside of that, what is important to the customer? Some customers in some of our spaces, for instance, in automotive, care immensely on quality. You can't have an airbag sensor that doesn't work. So quality becomes the key decision factor there. In our networking business, it's all about data throughput in a router. So they want the highest performing piece of silicon in that particular. In the consumer space, maybe they don't care as much about quality and they're more concerned about price. Yeah. So there's always other levers that you got to deal with, but generally it's going to be power and performance.
Okay. Yep. So these engineers that make these decisions, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously highly educated, highly trained, highly technical people. How do they make decisions?
Yeah. You know, we're not really an unknown commodity to our customers. They have already used us. They're going to have some religion about us as a company. They either love us, they're going to maybe room for improvement, let's say. They're going to generally know what we are. As I said earlier, the ideal customer profile for us is one we're already in. So we tend to not be unknown. They make those decisions based on what their experience has been with us previously. And that's why our sales and marketing engine at Freescale has to be that kind of hammer. That if we don't perform, if we don't address whatever their concerns are, whether it's transactional or whether it's, if there's a quality issue that we jump on it, you know, the thing that every salesperson wants is that call from the customer asking for help, so then you can just kill it. That's what is the biggest influence for us.
Okay, so the reason why I was walking you down that questioning is sales leaders that are watching this show, your peers, they're trying to figure out what their sales teams need to be good at, mm-hmm. Okay? And it makes common sense to say, well, be good at the things the customer cares about, right? So in this example, mm-hmm. and I know we're simplifying here, and that's fine, your design engineers care about power and performance. So your sales team, either your team or your channel partners, have to do an excellent job communicating to those engineers that you guys are best in the world in power and performance, right? So do you get your team just totally focused on that, or like how does that ripple through your sales approach?
So we want to have a technical sales force that knows our products. Yep. The last thing you want to do with a customer is have that meeting and there's answers that you can't get to, and that happens almost every meeting.
Which frustrates customers.
Frustrates customers. It lengthens the time to revenue, which is already long anyway because you got to wait for the next meeting and if a competitor's there. So you want to have the most technical sales and field engineering that you can possibly have to address those issues at hand. The other thing that becomes really critical is that you have to have a sales organization that is well partnered with the business unit. Because within the business unit, there are 3 or 4 ninjas that can answer any question about anything. And you bring those folks to the customer and everything gets addressed. So you just have to have a real symbiotic relationship where you're providing value to the business unit that says, here's the target, this is why it's important, this is the size, this is what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it, and then that person can come in and address those more technical issues.
So the relationship between the sales team and probably the marketing team with the business units
Yes.
is a key point for you.
It's massively important.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. All right, so now we know what your sales team needs to be good at, and we derive that based on what your customers' needs were. And you go inside the business units and you partner with them, and we find these ninjas, to use your words, right? How do you actually know if your sales team is any good at the things that are critical? Like, how do you know?
Time. So there's feedback loop. So we have customer surveys that go out. You have to have good sales managers that have relationships with the customers, that see how the team is working. We use metrics. Are you delivering the number? I mean, that's a pretty critical element of what we do in sales. There's a bunch of different vectors that we have to address.
Okay, so you are listening. So multiple feedback loops.
Yes.
To see if maybe your team's good at something the sales team doesn't care about. You're constantly making the sales team aware of what the customer cares about.
Yes, I think the customer is doing a pretty good job of that as well.
Directly, yeah.
But we also, if we have a good relationship with the business unit's going to communicate to you what's going well, what's not going well. And they're not shy.
All right. So Brandon, we're out of time. I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
And for helping our audience members increase the chances of making the number.
I appreciate you having me.
Okay, great. I would also like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this show, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV, which you can do at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV. Or you can find us by simply going to YouTube and looking for the SBI channel. We have some outstanding guests confirmed for future episodes, so you're not going to want to miss, because we've taken the show on the road, and we're going to be broadcasting from beautiful locations like this. But until then, I wish you the best of luck as you try to make your number.